Hi, this is Andy from Able Training, head trainer and managing director. Also, we've been putting a few of these vlogs together over the last few weeks and months, and the feedback on them has been really fantastic. So I hope you guys are finding them useful and something to reflect back on. I think they're definitely raising some interesting questions, and we've had some really good messages as well, both privately and directly on the social media platforms related to some of the stuff that we've been talking about. So that's fantastic to kind of get that feedback and that interaction from you guys, and I really hope that we can build on that and get some additional interactions going on. I thought I'd go into a little bit today, looking at a start of what we call the Able Target Model. And the Able Target Model is a system that we've developed looking at the principles of what we call positive behavioural support, which is around the elms of managing difficult behaviour. And I thought I'd put this brief blog together today just to introduce one of the starting points. This is a system that we teach, whether it be related to managing difficult or behaviours of concern from adults or young people, whether that be in care or even in people's own homes, to help them kind of manage the more difficult things. Or hey, sometimes this could even work for marriage guidance counselling. It's a case of kind of analysing behaviour or understanding behaviour. So the principle of target is always looking at improving outcomes for all, both the people who we are maybe working with, supporting, caring for, or ourselves as well. That's the overall kind of aim of the whole target system. It isn't just focused on those looking after, because I think for me there is such a symbiotic relationship in any relationship that if one person's okay, it's going to impact on the other person. If they're not okay, then they're not okay, and it has a kind of a knock-on effect. So the starting point of the Able Target Model is identify behaviours. As far as identify behaviours is when we look at the terms of managing behaviour that challenges or behaviours of concern, hazardous behaviour, which I have done a brief other blog on of looking at those terms, of the pros and cons of them. But our starting point is to actually look at, well, why am I finding this behaviour challenging? Is it because it could affect this individual's health, safety and welfare, or other people's health, safety and welfare? Is it affecting their social inclusion? Is it affecting their level of care? Or is it the fact that I don't like it and I don't agree with it? And it's one of those, the big thing with identify, I sometimes find that there is certain behaviour that, yes, is a little bit more cut and dry of this is hazardous to the environment or to the individual, and therefore this is something we need to pay attention to. But we also need to be very mindful of our own attitudes, beliefs and values related to behaviour, and how our beliefs and values sometimes impact on whether we think behaviour is right and wrong. And this kind of spreads across a whole spectrum of lots of different areas based on human relationships. We all have certain expectations about how others should behave towards us. Many of these come from previous experiences, our scripts that we learnt from our parents, as an example. Where we were taught from a young age, this is right and this is wrong, and this is how you should behave and this is how you shouldn't behave. And then we hold those same expectations throughout our lives. Now, of course, they're going to fluctuate and change, and we'll have different expectations depending on who we meet, where we are, the circumstances, and there's lots of factors that impact on our values, beliefs, and attitudes. If we look at kind of the influencing factors, parents are one, but then we've got other role models and peers as we move through, particularly our teenage years. We've also got the culture, and the culture is the rules, etiquette, and ideas belonging to institutions or groups. So whether that be a country, or whether that be a religious belief system, or whether it be a certain organisation that has certain ways of behaving that they think are right and wrong. So depending on which groups we belong to, we then tend to hold certain ideals or rules or etiquette that belong to that setting or that particular circumstance. With these kind of values and stuff that we have, obviously we then set up expectations of this is how other people should then behave around us, or this is the best way of living or behaving. A prime example of that is something like if you look at current standards on bathing and showering and hygiene, for instance. And this is always a bit of a bone of contention in many of the care settings that I deliver training to, where they're concerned about a person's well-being due to them not bathing or showering on a regular basis, for instance, whether it be a young person because they're worried because they're going through puberty and they're starting to smell a little bit, or whether it be somebody in care where we're worried about due to incontinence or skin integrity, that there could be issues for them. And that's the thing, is if it's a little bit more about it's impacting on them socially and that people are unwilling to sit near them because they don't smell very nice, or if it's a case of this person's becoming unwell, or that we're very worried about the integrity of the skin due to the wetness and therefore we need to take certain things, then we're going into that realms of it's affecting their health, safety and welfare. But the values side of things comes from the fact that most of us in modern culture feel that having a minimum of a bath or a shower every day is what's considered to be appropriate and normal. But there's no law for that. If I hadn't had a bath or a shower this morning or yesterday or the day before, nobody would probably know. If I'm regularly laundering my clothes, it wouldn't really make that much difference. I remember a study that was done on a lady, I can't remember all the details about it, but she did an experiment to basically spend 6 months not washing at all. She regularly laundered her clothes, but she found that her natural oils actually cleaned herself, and she never smelt or anything like that, and it didn't affect her health. I mean, I'm not suggesting that everybody should do that, but we have to kind of look at that. So based on what we consider to be culturally appropriate, are we then trying to enforce that on everybody else? And that's really important to kind of think of when we're dealing with certain behaviors that might challenge. Whether it be from a partner or a child or somebody we're supporting within the care industry, we have to be very mindful of our own beliefs and whether we're trying to impose those on somebody else. And also, are we trying to change this behaviour because it's in their best interests, or is it because it's in our best interests? I always remember a situation with a place I went to where a lady had made a lad get changed because he'd got himself dressed in what she perceived as an inappropriate ensemble of clothes. It was a mishmash. It didn't maybe go or look stylish in any way. It was a little bit of an unusual get-up. And she stopped him being allowed to go into town because she wasn't taking him out dressed like that. Now, this was a grown man, although he had learning disabilities and mental health issues. This was a grown man who had got himself dressed, and yes, he'd got himself dressed in an unusual set of clothing, but when tried to be persuaded that maybe he could wear something else, he'd been quite firm that that's what he wanted to wear. And yet he was then told that he wasn't allowed out if he didn't go and get himself changed. Now, the principle I always talk about now, well, why? Why did you do that? Why did you impose that will on him? And the reason or the rationale from this particular member of staff was so he didn't get bullied, so he didn't get laughed at or picked on. She was worried about the kind of social impact for him. But what I pointed out is that it feels like he got bullied to go and make him get changed. So why is bullying to make him dress a certain way better than people bullying him who he doesn't know, who in the street going, "You look silly"? Now, for an individual who's on the autistic spectrum, they may not be aware of other people kind of pointing and laughing at them. And if he didn't like it, he probably wouldn't wear that again. But it was a case of the fact that he got to choose what he wore and that he managed it himself should have been maybe the focus of praise rather than the focus of criticism. And that's one of the things that maybe we'll look at another time when I'm doing a bit of a session. When we're looking at identifying the behaviours that we find concerning, we shouldn't just identify the ones that we want to eliminate. And we need to decide why do we need to eliminate them, and looking at the benefit versus the cost of that particular behaviour, the benefit to them versus the cost to them. We also maybe need to look at as far as the behaviours we do want, and what are their strengths, what are their skills, what do we want to kind of grow and expand on, because the more we build on those, well, if you're finding, let's say we're trying to eliminate rudeness, for instance, I don't like it when this individual's rude, whereas there ever times when they're polite. Well, if we build on the politeness, what can't they do at the same time as being polite? and it's starting introduction principles to what we kind of teach in positive behavioral support. But yeah, I thought I'd do this as an introduction just to get you guys thinking about the principles of identifying behaviors that you find challenging, looking at your own beliefs, looking at the beliefs of those around you, and are those being imposed on somebody else for their best interests rather than our own.